Well, good evening from America. It's almost midnight here in America. Um, Let me just take you back to how we got to this situation, because I think it's very important to understand the background before we can say what America and Israel want from Iran. The whole question of Iran's involvement in nuclear technology goes all the way back to the late 1990s, when Iran and Russia made an agreement for the transfer of nuclear technology for the purpose of electric power generation. Now, that agreement was in force through about 2004, 2005, and the United Nations discovered that Iran was falsifying its reports about its nuclear research activities. And so the United Nations imposed sanctions on Iran because of the violation of their responsibilities under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now, those sanctions were in effect from 2005 all the way through the aughts and into the administration of President Obama. President Obama came into office with this express goal of stopping Iran from engaging in activities outside of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And by 2011, when the negotiations were beginning to form up, it wasn't the United States that asked for a new agreement or asked for an agreement. It was Iran, because Iran was suffering from the sanctions. And so the United States actually agreed to negotiate. And we know what happened in those negotiations. Iran, of course, under pressure from the sanctions, agreed to certain aspects of its nuclear technology agreement, its nuclear technology exploration. And that agreement went into effect in 2015. Now, the actual operation of that agreement was interrupted by the election of a new political administration in the United States. And that new political administration abruptly withdrew from that JCPOA agreement. So, yeah, okay, just let me. Yes, okay, so what I'm trying to show you is that this is a long subject, a long-running subject. The requirements for Iran's cooperation with the international community are quite clear. They haven't changed. The international community has said that Iran should not acquire the technology to provide the nuclear technology and weaponize that technology. And in addition, they should not develop the capability to miniaturize that technology, put it on a warhead, put it in a warhead, and put it on a missile. So there's no question that what's happening now is simply a reiteration of those requirements. Iran knows exactly. This didn't stop. This whole process didn't start, 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago or 2 years ago. It started 15, 20 years ago. And the Iranians are perfectly clear. Well, look, you have to go back to April and look at what the Israelis did to Iran in April. The Israelis essentially destroyed Iranian air defense capability and Iranian missile launching capability. They really put Iran in a very, very difficult situation. So when it was apparent that the Israelis, of course, are the embodiment of this demand that Iran not develop nuclear weapons capability. So when it was obvious that the Iranians were not interested in progressing in those negotiations, Israel took matters into its own hands. And frankly, Iran was incapable of defending itself. Well, this is a long-running debate, a long-running position of Iran. but there's ample evidence that that's not true. So I don't know how you resolve that. They have gone way beyond their need for enriched uranium. And their simple declaration that it's not for weapons development is pretty hard to accept. Well, look, the Iranian regime is in a very, very bad place. It has lost its ability to defend its own airspace, and it has lost its ability to control the armed forces because of the assassination of senior military personnel. I still believe, and I'm sure, I think this is obvious, that President Trump wants to have an agreement which Iran enters into and which Iran can be held to. That's not going to be something that is achieved by any further military action against Iran. So the ball is really in the Iranian court. And I think we have to sympathize with the Iranians, with the Iranian leadership, because they don't have much of a choice. And of course, we know backing down will be very painful. But most of my colleagues remind me that yeah, go ahead. No. Oh, in my opinion, President Trump is perfectly prepared to proceed with the negotiations. The trouble is Iran. And they have a very, very difficult situation, a very, very hard choices to make. And then, of course, there is an element that the United States does not control, and that's Israel. And the Israelis have proven that they have the capability to operate really inside Iran, which is certainly should be very concerning to the Iranian leadership. Well, yes, there is. Typically, the communications between heads of state are highly secret and guarded very carefully. But there have been indications just in the last few days that there have been communications between the Israelis and the Iranian leadership and between President Trump and the supreme leader. And that's to be expected. The back channel messages are really very important. It's almost impossible to conduct any kind of meaningful relations or negotiations in the public. So yes, President Trump is prepared. And as I said, the action is really up to the Iranians. They have a very difficult situation. They have very difficult choices to make. Well, look, we have to go back to 1979 and the Iranian Revolution. The French president at the time, Mr. Chirac, was instrumental in bringing Khomeini back to Iran and allowing the mullahs to steal the revolution away from the Iranian people. So I don't find it surprising that that France is interested in playing a major role at this particular point. But again, this is an issue that the Iranians have to decide about. Do they think that Macron could help them out? I don't know. I do think that Russia has a role, but let's take a look at where Russia stands. Russia right now, and President Trump, President Putin, and President Trump are working on a solution to Ukraine. There's no reason why President Trump and President Putin can't work on a solution to the problem of Iranian nuclear weapons technology development. But the Russians have no cards to play. The Russians would not benefit from any kind of price increase. And I don't think they really have no. You mean help negotiate with the United States? No, no, I don't. I think the Russians will play a very neutral role simply because they have many more interests involved in the relationship between President Trump and President Putin in the Ukraine. Well, will Israel allow an agreement? Israel will be watching very closely, and Israel undoubtedly will try to consult with the United States over whatever negotiations are taking place. But I agree. I think that the Iranians should negotiate with the United States, um, and they shouldn't try to negotiate directly with the Israelis. Now, just let me say a word about the political situation in Iran. There are many in Iran who are complaining about Khamenei's foreign policy. They're saying, why are we in this situation? Why is Iran an outcast? Why doesn't Iran have reasonable relations with Israel? Iran has had relations with Israel in the past. And the general analysis that I understand is that while the Iranian people are supportive of their government in terms of the attacks that Israel has been making on Iran, they would like to see a change in foreign policy. They would like to see Iran not be the bully, not be the hegemon in the Middle East. So I think we have to take that into consideration as well. Well, first of all, I think the Houthis are the only proxy that have any possibility of attacking Israel, because Hezbollah is over, Hamas is over. So let's not, let's not give them very much power. The Houthis are completely under the control of Iran. They have even less flexibility, less independence than Hamas or Hezbollah. So whatever the Houthis do, they're being controlled. That's being controlled by Iran, and I don't think Iran has decided how the Houthis could play a role in this situation. Well, I'm not sure that the Israelis will have total control over the beginning of the negotiations. The red lines have to be the goals of the negotiations. The red lines are no nuclear weapons development and no enrichment inside of Iran. Now, I think the Iranians are being unreasonable in not accepting this idea that they can enrich uranium, but they have to do it under strict control outside of Iran. And we know now that one of the propositions is that enrichment would take place in the Sultanate of Oman, where other countries, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, would also be enriching their uranium for peaceful purposes. And as I say, I think the Iranians are being totally unreasonable in not even accepting that. If you go back and take a look at the JCPOA, the Iranians agreed to give up all of their enriched uranium. And at the time, in 2015, they transferred all of their enriched uranium to Russia, where it presumably still is. And then they abided, in the beginning, they did abide by the regulations of the JCPOA. Well, I think that's two different. Unfortunately, those parts of the question are not necessarily linked. If the Iranians would agree to negotiate with the Israelis, I don't. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If the Israelis propose negotiations with Iran, I think that would be a good step. The idea, though, of not giving up, or the idea of giving up any kind of military coercion or military operation against Iran, no, I don't think Israel would do that. But again, Iran is in a very, very, very weakened, very vulnerable position. And I mean, we even hear that the Ayatollah is thinking about resigning and bringing in someone fresh to the leadership. So, I mean, everybody is saying that this is a dangerous time, and I think it is a dangerous time because things could happen in Iran. People could get a hold of rocket launchers or power in Iran and exercise it. And that would not necessarily be the policy of the government of Iran. Now, you haven't asked me about regime change in Iran, and I won't talk about it unless you ask me. Yes, of course they will. Negotiations are always a give and take situation, but Iran is not in a good position. Iran is not in a strong position entering into these negotiations. Iran has lied. Iran has hidden its intentions. Iran has hidden its enrichment facilities. And so there has to be some sort of confidence building process so that both sides have confidence that whatever agreement is reached will be obeyed, will be applied. You're talking about Iran with regard to Iran? Well, I would say let's talk about the best scenario for the future. I think the best scenario for Iranian people is for the current mullah administration to disappear and let the Iranian people reclaim the revolution that they started and won in 1979. This is the mullah regime now is equivalent to the occupation of Iran by a foreign entity. It does not represent the will of the Iranian people. So I'm fully in favor of regime change in Iran, and I think that would solve a lot of problems. Khamenei has already talked about resignation. And perhaps, that is the way that the Iranians will decide to go. Well, hopefully there will be, as I said, in this kind of negotiation, you have confidence building measures. One side does one thing, another side does the other, does another step. This is exactly, if you go back and look at the JCPOA, that's exactly the way the JCPOA was constructed. Iran did one thing. It sent all of its enriched material to Russia. The United States did another thing. It lifted some of the sanctions. This is how these agreements move forward. So there would be an agreement about what those confidence building measures are, and they would go forward. Not at all. It's always a pleasure. And I think you guys are doing a great job. And I hope I didn't offend you or say anything that you took exception to. But you know me, I usually speak my mind.